For over 30 years, the Colts football team called Baltimore home. So what exactly happened to make them suddenly decide to pack up and leave in the middle of the night? In today's video, we'll take a look back at how one owner's quest for a new stadium and the fight that ensued led to one of the most infamous moves in NFL history. Before we get started, I just want to say welcome to All Sports History. This is a channel where you'll find many sports documentaries on sports leagues like the NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, and much more. So please consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell if you don't want to miss any of those. Okay, let's get back to today's video. Long before the Colts moved to Indianapolis, they originally started in Baltimore. Well, sort of, but I'll get to that in a second. The name Colts typically refers to a young male horse, perfectly illustrated here by this piano-playing horse, as most horses do. The name was picked as a nod to the Preakness Stakes horse race, which takes place in Baltimore every year. The Preakness Stakes forms the Triple Crown of horse racing, along with the Belmont Stakes and the Kentucky Derby. There are actually two teams that mainly influenced the modern-day Colts team history. One of those teams, the original Baltimore Colts, whose colors were green and silver, started as a franchise in the All-American Football Conference, or AAFC for short. The team played from 1947 to 1950, but folded after just one season when the AAFC merged with the NFL. However, the team that we know today as the Colts can be directly traced all the way back to 1913 as the Dayton Triangles. Without getting too deep into it, the Triangles would eventually join the NFL in 1920 and would move around a lot, and I mean a lot. They moved to Brooklyn from Ohio and became the Brooklyn Dodgers. No, not those Dodgers. Yep, those Dodgers. Then they became the Brooklyn Tigers. Then later they merged with the Boston Yanks and played in Boston for 3 seasons before moving back to New York and becoming the New York Bulldogs. Then later they became the New York Yanks. Nope, not the baseball team. Yep, there we go. Then finally they moved to Dallas and became the Dallas Texans, which brings us back to just a couple of years after the former AAFC Baltimore Colts had folded. Halfway through the 1952 NFL season, the Dallas Texans owners sold their franchise back to the NFL after not being able to find a buyer. The NFL, looking to replace the Texans franchise, sold the old Dallas team to a new ownership group out of Baltimore, headed by businessman Carroll Rosenblum, on January 23, 1953. This new team opted to use the Baltimore Colts name, but kept the Dallas Texans colors of blue and white. Officially though, the NFL considers the current Colts franchise as an expansion club and does not officially recognize the previous histories of the Dayton Triangles through the Dallas Texans as part of their history. It wouldn't take long for the Colts to become a successful team, as within 5 years of forming, the Colts made it all the way to the NFL championship game in 1958. Facing off against the New York Giants, they would win their first championship in what would be known as the greatest game ever played, when a young quarterback named Johnny Unitas led the Colts down the field in overtime, which set up a 1-yard run into the end zone by Alan Amici, scoring the winning touchdown. The two teams would once again meet in the NFL championship the following year in 1959, and once again the Colts would defeat the Giants, winning back-to-back championships. The team would struggle to make it back to the championship game in the following seasons, which led to the team replacing their head coach, Weeb Ewbank, with a young Don Shula. Shula would turn the team around in his second season, finishing first in the Western Conference and appearing in the NFL championship game. The Colts would lose, however, to the Cleveland Browns, but Shula, seen here showing a startled Johnny Unitas the inside of his basement, would go on to win Coach of the Year, while Johnny Unitas won League MVP in 1964. The team remained successful for the next few seasons, with Shula and Unitas once again winning Coach of the Year and MVP in 1967. The Colts did manage to defeat the Browns in the 1968 NFL Championship game, earning their first ever appearance in the Super Bowl, where they would face off against the underdog New York Jets. Heading into the Super Bowl, the Colts were without their star quarterback Johnny Unitas, who in preseason had suffered an injury to his throwing arm. Unitas was replaced by veteran quarterback Earl Morrall, who went on to have one of the best seasons of his career, winning 13 regular season games that season. He would actually go on to win League MVP that season as well. Morrall would get the start over Unitas in the Super Bowl, while head coach Don Shula had to face off against his predecessor, Weeb Ewbank, who happened to be the head coach of the New York Jets. Ewbank would get his revenge on the Colts when the Jets stunned the world by holding the Colts to only 7 points, defeating them 16-7. The Colts would, however, return to the Super Bowl 2 years later in Super Bowl V, with Don McCafferty replacing Don Shula as head coach before that season. The Colts defeated the Dallas Cowboys 16-13 in what would be known as the Blunder Bowl for its poor play on both sides, but it earned the team its first franchise Super Bowl win and its fourth overall NFL championship win, which included the 1958, 59, and 68 wins. By 1972, Carroll Rosenblum, the owner of the Colts, had grown tired of dealing with the city of Baltimore over issues with the aging Memorial Stadium, having to share facilities with the Orioles, and a dislike of the local press. Rosenblum decided to sell the team, and in a historical sale actually ended up swapping franchises with the Los Angeles Rams owner Robert Irsay. Irsay literally purchased the LA Rams and traded it with Rosenblum all on the same day on July 13, 1972. Unfortunately for the Colts, Irsay's ownership wasn't as smooth as Rosenblum's, as the team struggled and failed to reach the playoffs 3 years in a row after the ownership swap. Even legendary quarterback Johnny Unitas, seen here doing his best Al Bundy impression, ended up getting traded to the San Diego Chargers after the 1972 season. The team did bounce back, however, towards the late 1970s when the Colts made the playoffs 3 years in a row, starting in 1975. However, they would lose each time in the divisional round to the Pittsburgh Steelers twice, and most famously to the Oakland Raiders in 1977, with the ghost to the post play. He'd been looking to build a new stadium in Baltimore to replace their current home Memorial Stadium. He quickly ran into the same issues that the Colts' previous owner, Carroll Rosenblum, ran into, which is that the city of Baltimore was very much against using public tax dollars to fund a new stadium. Around 1973, Maryland state planners came up with a project that could potentially become home to the Colts and the Orioles, while also having the ability to convert into an arena for any future basketball or hockey team. The project, known as the Baltodome, sweet name, was very much in line with the trend at the time to build a multi-purpose stadium that could be home to many sports teams. The proposed site would have been near Baltimore's Inner Harbor area, close to Camden Yards, where the Orioles play today. The Baltodome project, however, never got the support it needed to pass the Maryland state legislature, and by February of 1974, Maryland's governor Marvin Mendel officially shut it down for good. Initially, this didn't upset Irsay too much, as he felt that time was on his side and that people would eventually come around to see that the Colts needed a new stadium, especially when newer dome arenas were being built in New Orleans and Seattle. However, in the local election of 1974, Baltimore's comptroller, Hyman Pressman, put forth a ballot measure to amend the city's charter. The amendment, called Question P, stated that Memorial Stadium would be recognized as a memorial to war veterans, and therefore no city funds should be used to construct a new stadium that would replace it. The measure passed, which enraged Irsay because without some public funding, it would be extremely difficult to get a new sports complex built. This marked a turning point in the relationship between the Colts and Baltimore, which rapidly deteriorated afterwards. By the late 1970s, Irsay had been listening to offers from a few different cities wanting the Colts to move there. Most notably, Phoenix, Indianapolis, Los Angeles, Memphis, and Jacksonville all jumped in offering enticing deals to Irsay to relocate. Initially, the Colts wanted to use these offers as a way to put pressure on Baltimore to either help fund a new stadium or at the very least spend the money on renovations to Memorial Stadium. By 1980, both the Colts and the Orioles asked for $25 million in renovations to the aging stadium. Maryland's legislature would only agree to the renovation plans if they knocked it down to $23 million and if both teams signed long-term leases with the stadium. However, the deal never went through because the Orioles refused to sign anything more than a one-year lease, with the Colts also refusing to sign long-term. The city refused to budge on its stance to spend money on a new stadium due to the city being cash-strapped and also due to the reluctance of the public to fund such a costly expenditure. Even with the Orioles having decent attendance and winning the World Series in 1983, it was difficult to get the city to budge. The Colts, on the other hand, routinely struggled with attendance and had a recent stretch of miserable seasons. In fact, the Colts were so bad that before the 1983 NFL Draft, future star quarterback John Elway, who was widely seen as the potential number 1 overall pick by the Colts, publicly refused to play for them and threatened to play for the New York Yankees, who also drafted him instead. This move forced the Colts' hand into trading Elway, which they eventually did to the Denver Broncos. Sensing that they had a real shot at an expansion club or luring the team away from their current home, the city of Indianapolis approved of a 60,000-seat dome stadium that would be an expansion to the Indianapolis Convention Center. Construction of the dome began in May of 1982 and would open 2 years later in 1984. The dome, which was originally called the Hoosier Dome and later named the RCA Dome, cost $77.5 million to construct. Its design was very similar to that of the Metrodome in Minneapolis and the Pontiac Silverdome in Michigan, which all featured air-supported roof structures. By early 1984, Baltimore had made Irsay an offer of a $15 million loan with a guarantee of 43,000 tickets sold for each game for the next 6 seasons, and a chance to buy the Colts training facility from the city for $4 million. With Baltimore's mayor William Schaefer adding the city can't build a new stadium because they don't have the taxpayers to support building a $60 million building, and that unless a private company was to build it, it wasn't going to happen. Not long after this, Irsay got the approval from the NFL to move to another city of his choosing, and Irsay narrowed his preferred choices down to just two, Indianapolis and Phoenix. In January of 1984, NFL Commissioner Pete Rozelle officially announced that any expansion to the league would be put on hold for the time being. Because of this, both Phoenix and Indianapolis became more aggressive in their attempts to lure the Colts away from Baltimore. Phoenix offered the Colts a similar loan that Baltimore was promising, but with a better interest rate, as well as rent-free use of Arizona State University's Sun Devil Stadium. Not long after this offer, Irsay visited the Hoosier Dome construction site to tour the area. Deputy Mayor of Indianapolis, David Frick, said that he could tell that Irsay was visibly moved by the new stadium, and emotionally he was already making the move. And really, it's not hard to see why with promotional videos like this.
More than 1.5 million Hoosiers will welcome you to the Circle City in 1984. There's a cosmopolitan flavor you'd expect from the nation's 12th largest city. Everything's looking up in Indianapolis. The new $72 million Hoosier Dome will be completed for your arrival. It's part of the Convention Center complex in the heart of Indianapolis, just the latest symbol of sports enthusiasm in Indianapolis.
Upon hearing about Irsay's openly discussing the Colts moving away, the city of Baltimore became very aggressive in their actions to keep the team. On March 27, 1984, the Maryland Senate passed legislation that gave Baltimore the right to take ownership over the Colts through eminent domain. This was a similar tactic that the city of Oakland used against the Raiders to keep them from moving. The eminent domain legislation triggered a domino effect of events in rapid order. First, the city of Phoenix, sensing that this could turn into a long, drawn-out legal battle, retracted their relocation offer to the Colts. After hearing of the eminent domain news, Irsay's hand was forced to make a big decision very quickly, or he could face losing his team. The day after the bill passed the state Senate, Irsay feared that the city of Baltimore would move quickly to seize control over the team once the eminent domain bill was signed into law by the governor. So Irsay called the mayor of Indianapolis, William Hudnut, asking if his offer still stood. The mayor and Irsay agreed to a $12.5 million loan, the use of the yet-to-be-open Hoosier Dome, and a $4 million training facility. With a big move on the way, Irsay called his friend John B. Smith, who just happened to be the CEO of the Mayflower Moving Company, and got him to send 15 moving trucks to the Colts offices. Later that night, the 15 Mayflower moving trucks arrived at the Colts facilities in Baltimore. There are some conflicting reports as to when exactly the trucks showed up, some reporting around 10 p.m., while others saying it was closer to 2 a.m. In either case, it took the moving crew about 8 hours to pack everything up, and by noon the next day, the entire Colts organization was gone, with the exception of the team's marching band, who just managed to get their gear in time before it was moved with the team. Each truck took a different route out of Baltimore, fearing that the Maryland State Police might try to stop them in order to stall so that the eminent domain document could be signed into law. Once each truck crossed over state lines into Indiana, Indiana State Police personally escorted the trucks to their new home in Indianapolis. Later that day, Mayor Hudnut held a press conference to officially welcome the Colts to Indianapolis. Baltimore, on the other hand, was stunned by the move. Mayor Schaefer appeared on the front page of the Baltimore Sun in tears and would later change his stance on building a new stadium, making it one of the top priorities of his legislative agenda. The Colts would play their first game as the Indianapolis Colts on August 11, 1984, in a preseason matchup against the New York Giants. In the meantime, the move to Indianapolis triggered lawsuits from Baltimore, which would go on for 2 years before finally being settled in March of 1986. The fallout from the move prompted voters in Baltimore to repeal the controversial Question P measure that blocked any chance of using public funding for new stadiums. The aftermath of the Colts leaving Baltimore led local politicians to strengthen their efforts on keeping the Baltimore Orioles from leaving as well. The Orioles, just like the Colts, had been looking for a new stadium for a long time. Plans were developed throughout the late 1980s, and construction of a new ballpark began in 1989, just 5 years after the Colts left town. The new ballpark, named Oriole Park at Camden Yards, opened in 1992, which again was built near the original proposed site of the failed Baltodome project. Around this time, the city was also trying to persuade the NFL to grant the city with a new expansion team. However, the NFL shocked almost everyone when they granted a new team to Jacksonville, Florida, instead of one of the two favorites, St. Louis or Baltimore. With all other options exhausted, Baltimore was left with the one thing that they were most reluctant to do, which was take a team from another city. There were rumors that the Orioles owner Peter Angelos, seen here not knowing what to do with his hands, might convince the LA Rams to relocate to Baltimore, but no such deal ever worked out, and the Rams instead moved to St. Louis. There was another team, however, the financially struggling Cleveland Browns, and their owner Art Modell, who was open to listening to offers from other cities. Baltimore promised to build a brand new stadium and give the Browns a $25 million subsidy. Modell agreed to the terms and made the official announcement in November of 1995. Initially, Modell wanted to keep the Browns' name, history, and colors, but the NFL stepped in and reached a settlement with the city of Cleveland that Cleveland would get to keep the Browns' history and colors, and that a new Browns team would play no later than the 1999 season. But don't worry, you'll get to bust out those orange and brown Zumba pants in no time. Through a fan vote, the fans picked the Baltimore Ravens as the new nickname for the football team. The Ravens played at Memorial Stadium for the first 2 seasons, and then moved into their new home, Ravens Stadium, now known as M&T Bank Stadium, in 1998. It wasn't just the fans and the local politicians who were upset about the Colts leaving. There was also one person of note who was not too thrilled with the Colts. Legendary quarterback Johnny Unitas, disgusted with how the whole move went down, publicly cut all ties with the Indianapolis Colts organization. He went as far as telling the Pro Football Hall of Fame not to display any of his memorabilia unless it specifically stated it was from the Baltimore Colts. When the Ravens came to town, Unitas became a fan and attended many home games, while the Ravens even built a statue of Unitas outside of M&T Bank Stadium. So what did you guys think of the Colts leaving in the middle of the night for Indianapolis? Would you continue to follow a team that moved away? Let me know in the comments below. If you've enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and feel free to share with anyone else who might also enjoy it. For more sports history, check out my website at allsportshistory.com, and be sure to follow All Sports History's social media pages, which I posted the links to in the description below. And thanks for watching.